All right, so I am going to kick us off for this second session. There's still a couple of folks to make their way in, but we are recording, and we're just going to start off just talking a bit about heritage in digital spaces and why we kind of chose this topic for the panel. I think I barely have to even introduce it because so many of our mentees picked up on it right away, even before we've started, whether it was Shauna talking about NFTs, which I still don't understand exactly what they are, but maybe Shauna, I can talk to you on the expo floor later. Or whether Sean talking about the metaverse and just so many amazing digital tools that I think a lot of people reflecting on COVID and everything, just being kind of grateful that it happened now when we have all of these tools so that we can stay connected and keep offering all of these services to our visitors and to our communities. So I think there is lots to say about this, and I'm going to leave it to our wonderful panel and our mentees to start us off on these conversations. So I'll just introduce our panelists. They're just going to kind of expand on these points a little bit, and then we'll get into the questions and discussions. So first off, I would like to introduce everyone to Ryan Dodge. He's the Chief Digital Officer at Ingenium. He's responsible for the corporation's public-facing digital presence across the spectrum of on-site and online experiences. And he has over 15 years experience in the sector. Over to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Megan, and hi, everybody. I mean, I don't know what more to say. I think the mentees have, like you said, Megan, really sort of brought some really good points and some really good thoughts to this discussion, this table. I think we're all sort of thinking about the same things. I think my biggest thing, is as a national organization, we reach people in the National Capital Region really well, but we don't reach people in the North or on the West Coast or the East Coast pretty much at all. And so, that's really our biggest challenge is how do we expand and reach those people from coast to coast to coast. And as a national organization, it's in our mandate to do so. And I think definitely digital is a way to go about that. I think the other thing is accessibility, right? And not just, physical or mental or cognitive accessibility. I think opening up access to our sites beyond things like opening hours or the fact that you have to travel to visit a bricks and mortar institution. I think there's ways that we can get around those types of access as well through technology. So excited to hear what everyone else has to say. And thanks for having me. I really enjoyed what the mentees had to say and looking forward to this discussion.
Wonderful, thank you, Ryan. Next up, we have Jenny Ford. So Jenny's a creative development specialist at the Canadian Museum of History and the Canadian War Museum. She has extensive experience working on exhibitions and visitor programming, notably in the realm of new and emerging technologies. Go ahead, Jenny.
Thanks, Megan, and thank you for organizing the panel today. It's great to be a part of it. First off, those presentations were amazing from the mentees, and I definitely learned something from them. So those were fantastic. So as Megan said, I'm a creative development specialist at the Canadian Museum of History and the War Museum, which means that I work developing exhibitions. So creative development specialist is a fancy word for interpretive planner. So that's what I do. But I have about 10 years in the field working at many different institutions. I've worked at historic sites, I've worked in traditional museum spaces and non-traditional museum spaces, like Parliament, which is kind of a weird, big historic site. But through all that experience, I've done a ton of both personal and non-personal programming. So you name it, I've probably done it at some point. But as Megan said, I've worked a lot in the realm of VR, immersive projection, done a ton of video, digital interactives, and a lot of other stuff as well. So Ryan, you stole some of my key points that I was going to mention, but obviously the pandemic, as also all our mentees have highlighted, have really kind of just, I feel like it's almost pushed a lot of the digital tools that are at museums and institutions' disposal forward in a way, because we had no other choice. And it's really interesting to have seen the ways that institutions have used those tools. And also really cool, because there's a lot of tools that I think we've drawn upon that bring in new different ways of storytelling. You know, we think about how do you tell a story with VR versus with an app versus a digital interactive. And there's so many cool things there in terms of how we use those devices effectively, because they're not always used effectively. And lastly, as Ryan mentioned, accessibility is something that I've also been really interested in. And a lot of people do equate digital with accessible, and that's not always the case. So it's how do we bring those two alongside together? So those are just some tidbits, some things that have been rolling around in my brain, especially after the presentations today. So I'll throw it back to you, Megan, and I look forward to the questions.
Awesome, thank you, Jenny. And our third panelist tonight is Lis Edwards. Lis is a public historian and history content writer at Hive Media Group. Lis has experience working with museums, archives, historic sites, and community organizations where she has designed museum exhibits, educational programs, archival resources, and podcasts. Lis.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liz. Great to be here. I'm so happy to be part of this. Mentees, you guys did an amazing job. And I especially relate because I am also a young professional who just completed her master's about not even a year ago. So many of the questions that you guys were asking, I've been asking too. And so it's been really great to see those reflected. I'm a public historian as well as a history content writer. So I kind of have 2 feet in different fields. I've got one in the history and then one more in the media publishing side of things, which is super interesting because they are currently on 2 very different levels. And then I'm also, my kind of side passion project is podcasts, and that's kind of where my specialty comes from. I think they are really amazing medium, especially if we're talking about digital accessibility. They are cheap to produce. You can make amazing things. You can create content that speaks to different people. You can, work with Indigenous traditional knowledge and oral history and all these amazing things. And those are things that I've kind of been playing around with as someone who's produced 3 podcasts now. Yeah, I guess that's it for me. Again, really looking forward to hearing the questions. And yeah.
Wonderful. And on that note, I'm going to first open up the floor to our mentees to ask any questions of whatever your choice is, all the panelists, or if you have a particular question for a specific panelist. So if there are any of our mentees who would like to turn their video on and ask a question, now is the time to do so. Otherwise, we have a few questions as well. But if there's any mentees, maybe we can get the, oh, Sammy?
Sure, I'll take the bite. Hello, thank you, panelists. I just have a question. I'm in digital specialization of digital humanities and my degree. And I think a thing we're thinking about a lot is what practical digital skills can we be learning in our degree that we can bring to the professional pursuits. So I just would broadly ask what type of skills you think digitally that history students should be thinking about cultivating, any professional really, and what that'll look like in the future of their roles.
I guess I'll go.
Oh, Jenny, yeah.
Yeah, I'll put my hand down.
Oh, yeah.
So this is probably not the answer you were looking for, but I mean, I've developed a lot of different things, like in terms of touchscreens or whatever. The bottom line is that unless you're really, really getting into like deep coding or anything like that, you're probably never going to get the skills to make your own, you know, really flashy digital touchscreen. Yes, there's like things that you can be more technologically literate. There's lots of free, not free programs, but cheaper programs out there or things that you can use. I would say, though, that the number one skill that I would be applicable, I actually my first career was in journalism. And through journalism, I learned how to write for different media. You know, the way that you write an audio script is different than you write a video script than you would write for a digital interactive. So I would say the number one skill is actually just how to write for different media, how to storyboard, how to write for, you know, video, audio, whatever. Because it's all so different. And in my experience, at least, I have found that that is almost more useful than perhaps learning actually the core digital side, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would just sort of echo what Jenny says. I didn't talk about my background at all, but I actually have a BA in history and an MA in museum studies with a technology focus. I did my MA online when it was almost cool to do it online, but not quite yet. So, you know, how I got into this field is I wrote a content strategy for an iPhone app when everyone wanted an iPhone app, and then partnered with someone who knew how to do the coding. You know, and I think that's a big thing to recognize as a museum or a heritage professional, is you have to partner with a lot of different groups across an organization to get a project done. And so, you know, Jenny talked a lot about writing differently and for different mediums. And that's something, you know, I learned early on when I was at the ROM in Toronto, and did a lot of work teaching curators and sort of more traditional museum colleagues how to take what they were writing for exhibit panels or, you know, their publications, their peer-reviewed publications, and translate that to other forms of content, blog posts, you know, you name it, right? So I think it's, I wouldn't, like Jenny said, I wouldn't worry too much about learning how to, you know, learning PHP and Python and all that kind of stuff. You can if you want, but I think it's more about bringing those skills that you already have and finding those partners and working together on to deliver a project in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I would echo what both Ryan and Jenny just said, especially the learning to write for different medium. And I honestly think just learning to write in general, it's still, I feel like I'm finally at a place where I've started to de-radicalize the academic part of my brain, because I literally spent so long in school. You spend, you know, 4 or 5 years even just in university, and especially in history, you write for a long time about some boring things, and it's, well, we think it's really interesting. Like, I'll get sucked down a, you know, 3-hour archive hole of like, oh my gosh, look at all the cool things I'm finding. Not everyone really thinks or feels that way. So I think it's really important to look at other content, not even outside of your field, and see what those people are doing, what's working well for them. Especially coming from a media background, a lot of like learning about click-through rates, learning about engagement, how to drive engagement, all of those things. Because unfortunately, everyone is kind of vying for the same attention, especially in, you know, in history. It's like, okay, do I want to read this digital exhibit or this digital exhibit? And so learning to take in like what different competitors are doing is super important. But I think definitely a lot of what you need to do is the basics. Is learn how to write for the public, learn how to, you know, be engaging. But when it comes to even just, you know, okay, I want to explore using AR in an exhibit or something like that, everything's so accessible now. Like, you're not going to be a pro at it, but you can go onto YouTube and you can learn really easily how to do those things. And that's how I started with podcasts. Like, I just bought a $40 mic on Amazon and watched a couple videos, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And my one podcast that I run, we've, had over 20,000 downloads in more than 50 countries now. So, and we didn't even expect that to happen. We thought 3 people would listen, but I think just like learning how to do it and trying it, and even if you fail, that's all that matters. Yeah.
It all comes back to delivering a narrative, right? And museums, we're good at that, right? We know how to do that in a box. It's nice if it's rectangular with white walls and nice and easy. But I think the difference in the world we live in now is we haven't really figured out how to translate and deliver that narrative in an effective way across digital, right? And we've been at it for 25, almost 30 years now, right? Museums were some of the first to have websites. So I think it's really that sort of, everyone wants the new shiny thing, but it's all about that story and that hook. And is that story engaging? Is there something that's, practical that people can learn? Or, when I was writing content strategy at the ROM, I did a lot of research around the psychology of why people share stuff, why they engage with stuff online. And it really comes down to, is it funny? Is it useful? Like, is it practical? Is it a recipe, or like how to plant your flowers so they'll grow better? Does it make them angry? And not angry like they're physically mad at something, but like, were they angry enough to say, oh, this is a crazy story, to share it. And it's that sort of thing you have to understand to to move your content forward and on the web, right? So it all starts with that story, and museum people are really good at that. So it's just finding those ways to translate.
Thank you.
Ryan,
Yeah,
do you have a question?
Catherine.
You can go ahead. Oh, sorry, Ryan.
I was just saying, Catherine had a good point in the chat about personalizing stories and, thinking about your audience ahead of time when you're producing things. Who is this for? Why would they want to engage with it? That sort of things. It's really good.
My question links really nicely to that point. So that was like a built-in segue, which is nice. I just wanted to pick all of your brains about, how do you decide what medium you're going to use? Once you decide, okay, we're going to tell the story digitally, how do you kind of pinpoint what's the best way from there? Specifically, like, Liz, I share your love of podcasts. That's also why I'm making a podcast. So that is particularly interesting to me, but some stories don't translate to audio, or some don't translate to video. So how do you think through those sorts of questions?
Oh my goodness. It's one of those things that I feel like my brain just does, and I don't know exactly how it does it, but I will try to answer this question best I can. Honestly, I think it as you already mentioned, it starts with audience. You kind of work backwards a little bit. You don't go in, as you've already said, and say, like, let's make a podcast and then figure it out from there, or let's do a digital interactive or an app and then work backwards. Like, that never works, because you're always going to be shoehorning things in and it doesn't quite work. So you got to figure out, I think, first what the need is. And what the purpose is and what the audience is, and then work back and then be like, okay, well, what's the most effective way that we could do this? And I think that I will share an example from my time when I was at Parliament, which is VR. And the need in that case was that it launched during the pandemic, but it was never meant to. But the need was that the center block building was closing, so the center block of Parliament is closing. People can't visit anymore, but people might still want to visit. People are still going to come to Ottawa, and they're still going to say, hey, I want to go in that building, or I want to see inside the main Parliament building. How do I do that? So we have a need there. And we pinpointed who our audience would be. It's broad in this case, but we knew who we were trying to reach. And then you start thinking about media. Well, what are the different tools at our disposal? So that's when you go, okay, like, let's look at VR. And what does VR offer us? VR offers us an opportunity to create realistic spaces. It allows us an opportunity to look around these spaces and feel like you're there. And, yeah, there's other tools you could have used. Like we could have just done, a regular virtual tour, I don't know, an app, I don't know. There's many other tools that you could use to fill that need. So, one medium is not always the answer. There are definitely ways, and, good interpretation can be accomplished, whether you have a low budget or a high budget, right? Like at the end of the day, it's just about getting your message across. In that case, VR was the right fit for many, many, many reasons, time, resources, budget, like you name it. There's a whole bunch of other reasoning that goes into that. Yeah, it all starts with filling that need and understanding the different type of media and the strengths and weaknesses of them, and going from there with what your best pick is based on all those other factors as well.
Yeah, I would also, I would definitely say like accessibility is something obviously that we're all thinking about. And I guess the way I can explain my answer is I'll do like a tidbit, I guess. So one of the podcasts that I was able to co-produce with No History, I worked with No History during an internship for my public history program, and we wanted to tell a place-based history of Beausoleil Island, which is an island and a national park in Georgian Bay, where I worked. And there's a lot of really rich history there, specifically Ojibwe and Métis history there. And so what the vision was to be able to collect information and then share it in a way that honors traditional Indigenous storytelling in the area by making it place-based. So every episode was about a specific place, but we were using oral history and storytelling from actual Indigenous people in the area, actual knowledge holders, and just sharing it. And it was just their voice. And that's why I love podcasts, that it's voice-based. But I think you could really do that with anything, just like a video or, even just an image gallery. I think we're all very information overload, and it's very easy to create something like an exhibit that has like 20 different aspects of like, there's a video, there's a VR portion, there's an auditory experience, there's all these different things. But I think like Jenny said this, like being able to kind of work backwards and say, what is my intention? What do I want people to get out of this? And then kind of going from there. But I honestly think that simple is best in most cases. Not a one size fits all, but yeah.
I agree completely.
Yeah, I think it's really important to place the audience first. Museums, and this is a huge generalization, are very insular organizations. They have internal pressures and politics that, dictate sometimes the content that they produce, and there are things that people need to, deliver for research, et cetera. I think flipping that on its head and saying, okay, does the audience really need this information from us? How can we be of better service to our audience? It's something that I did at the ROM when I was there for our digital engagement, social media presence, and really sort of let the audience lead us down that path. And our numbers just went through the roof because we were delivering things that they wanted to engage with, not stuff that we thought they would want to engage with. And then, the other side of that is do your research. So don't just look at the people that are already engaging with you. Look at the people that aren't engaging with you and figure out why they aren't. Is it because you're using the wrong technology, or you're after the wrong demographic, or, that sort of thing. So there's lots of research out there on how different groups, I'll say Canadians, use their devices, what they do on their devices, how long they spend on their devices. There's lots of research out there on how you can, where you can find how people engage with media, how often they listen to podcasts, how often they watch Netflix, all that kind of stuff. And I would say, do your research and then try to make an informed decision on how to best apply your content and the story you're trying to get across.
I wanted to just touch on a question that someone just asked in the chat. Ruth, you just asked, how do you determine what the audience wants? I can't think of the name of the speaker. I will maybe try and find it and email it to Megan, but there's a great TED Talk that I watched of someone, I think in the San Francisco area, who's running an art museum. And she had that exact same question of how, okay, I understand that I need to speak to my audience. I need to connect with my community and my visitors. How do I do that? And she talked about how, as museums especially, we need to work towards breaking down those four walls of a museum and not being afraid to go into a community and ask, how can this organization, how can this structure better reflect you? Are we in a community that has a lower income, but we're doing this like super high class, I don't know, like art museum? There's maybe a lot of young children in that area, and we don't have an area for children to just come and play and learn, those kinds of things. So looking at your community and also being able to ask your community genuinely, openly, we're here for you, we should reflect you. So how can we do that? I think it's a little daunting. It sounds scary, but you can do that through social media. And I think so many people appreciate you just showing your face and not being the museum of so-and-so, and being an actual person with a smile on your face saying, hey, I want to help. I want you to see yourself in this museum, not the other way around. Yeah.
Yep. I completely agree, Liz. Like, just ask. If you want to be of service, you got to find out how. And so, the best way to do that is be present and ask and be honest. I think honesty is a big, and for a long time, museums, still are to some degree seen very as elitist organizations, and, we're lecturing you. And I think, it's slowly changing. But it's up to us to change that, right? And do right by those audiences and ask those questions.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jenny, if I cut you off.
No problem. No, I will just echo all that. Yeah, you gotta ask, and visitor research is so important. And that sounds super formal, but it can be informal, as my fellow panelists already alluded to, right? It can be as much as putting up a poll about something. Google Forms, surveys are SurveyMonkey are easy tools to use. And I found that every time I've put out, either a survey or done a focus group or whatever, I always have, I bet you people will say X. And then I go in and people always surprise me. And so I think it just sort of proves that, there's always something unexpected there, and it often leads to better ideas in the end. We talked about how to choose a media as well. And, it's exactly that too, where it's like, I've gone and been like, okay, I was working on sort of the infancy stages of developing a new teacher education website. So we went and we surveyed teachers across the country. And again, the answers that they came back with about their needs sort of shifted exactly like where we were going to be even headed with that website. It shifted the whole project. So I think just being open to how those discussions and that feedback can affect the sorts of media you use, how you use the media, is also really important.
Wonderful. I'm just going to ask a question that was posted in the chat from Storm Hogan. So how do you approach finding resources, so financial, hosting, platforms, to support digital initiatives? And further, are there ways of doing this as an individual or as a member of an Indigenous community, a First Nation?
I don't know, Liz, you probably know more. Like there's Canada Council, there's Digital Museums Canada, there's the Bell Media Fund is one that's often overlooked. A lot of the banks, weirdly, have money for arts and culture programs that may be more difficult to get as an individual. But if you find a partner, like someone who Liz works for, that can help you with your project, a lot of time a partnership and then finding those types of funds can really help sort of push that proposal over the top.
Yeah, I would say, unfortunately, I don't know too much about like funding in terms of like government or different company programs, that kind of thing. But I can speak to a little bit about if you're an individual trying to get funding for a certain initiative, going through grants and everything is great, but you can for sure, if you are, again, I keep hammering home the podcast. I'm so sorry. It's like just the one thing that I'm clearly passionate about, but that is one where you can definitely monetize. It can be a little daunting. Something that with my podcast, we're in our kind of second year, and we're trying to figure out how we can monetize. So whether that's through Patreon, creating merch, that kind of thing, you can really level up your content by, you know, giving a subscription or that kind of thing. But I know, especially as someone who's starting out, that can be really daunting. And then, yeah, unfortunately, I don't have many answers for Indigenous resources either. I'm a settler. I should definitely educate myself more about that. So I'm going to do that after this. But yeah.
Yeah, so Canada Council has a lot of different funding sort of bodies within them. So it's very specific on depending on what you want to do, but that's a good one. But like I said, yeah, the private sector, a lot of banks have, RBC has one, and telecom companies also sometimes have those. There's also NSERC and SHIRC that do grants, but those are sort of, yeah, you have to partner with a few different people to get those ones.
Wonderful. Any other questions, either from mentees or folks in the chat? Or Sam? I think Sam had a couple of questions when we were brainstorming before as well.
Yeah, I'm just looking at my list of questions, just seeing how much of it has already been answered. I think,
you know, a bunch of mine were already answered. But that just means those really great conversations.
If there's I just wanted to touch on something that one of the mentees talked about, and sort of, you know, a museum sector not being as lucrative as, you know, some other sectors, and, you know, taking a long time to sort of progress in your career. And that's definitely something, you know, that is real in this sector. And I would actually, you know, I worked at the ROM for 13 years, and I actually left the ROM. I left the sector for a short period and went to the CBC, and it was probably one of the best experiences of my career, to get outside the museum world and really sort of gain some perspective. You know, and you can always come back, right? And I think for those of you just starting out, I think, you know, don't be so caught up on, you know, getting that big job right out of school, right? You know, I think it's a process, and you gain those valuable experiences over time. You know, I think Sean's example in his presentation about all of the different jobs he did to get to where he is today, all of those experiences are really valuable, and lead you down your path to the next step. And so, you know, I can remember being really young, just out of school, and really was applying for stuff I had no business to be applying for. And my first job in the sector was selling audio guides at the ROM. You know, and it's everyone needs their start, and they're all, you know, there's value and importance in all of those types of roles, no matter how small or how big. You know, we're all here for similar reasons, right? To engage people with history and culture, and to sort of move society forward for the better, right? So I would just say, don't get hung up on sort of, you know, not getting the right job now. It'll come down the time. Also, I don't know a lot of museum professionals who don't have a side hustle. So, you know, keep that in mind, right? All you podcasters and you know, people out there, it's totally fine to have a side hustle if you can make it work.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It's have a side hustle. You don't even need to hustle the thing that you're doing. If you're passionate about it, I still volunteer at a local museum here in London. Like things that will, especially, if you are, okay, you're going to pay the bills, going to do a corporate job or whatever else, like make sure you keep that passion going. But also I think, and you guys are already doing an amazing job by being able to look within yourselves and your skill sets and say, like, actually a mentorship program. I keep thinking, I'm like, man, I should do something like this. If you guys ever do something like this in the London area, that'd be amazing. So being able to just like constantly be asking yourself, like, what is a skill that I can acquire? I think right now there are a lot of dinosaurs, I guess, who are going to be leaving the museum industry. We're really kind of polarized between like some of the boomers and then, some more up and coming, where we are the ones who want to digitize and innovate and that kind of thing. And it's a little bit scary when me right now, I'm like, I'm going to be able to maybe move out of this tiny apartment and own a house in like 15, 20 years if I'm lucky. So it's scary when you're really passionate about something, but a lot of the salaries that you're seeing or the positions that you're seeing just like aren't that dream history job that we all have in our minds. So being able to just constantly innovate as best you can and learn new skills is just going to get you one step closer each time to getting that job, and to being able to just go into interviews that you're like, this is a huge curator job that I'm probably not going to get because I'm 23. It's still really good to get out there and network and say, I've done XYZ skills, and I keep learning every day.
Yeah, I mean, we hear all the time about, the wages in the sector and all that stuff. And I think that I know it's a big issue, and I don't want to pretend that it's not, or that it's okay, because it's not. We are a very skilled people with often highly educated people, and yeah, we should be paying more, but there's also the realities of museum funding, and there's a million things at play in there. I mean, it is a bit of a tough road. I mean, I've been lucky in, I guess, my museum journey. However, I was on contract for a very, very long time, and short contracts that just got extended, and it's hard to live that way, and it's tough. I remember my first ever sort of heritage job. I was kind of dipping my toes into the sector, and I applied for a job with Parks Canada, and I was like, there's no way, they're never going to give this to me, and they did. So I think, again, don't sell yourself short, and I think it's okay to be a little bit picky for the job that when you're applying for jobs. Don't sell yourself short. Know your worth and apply for jobs that you're worth, because that also sends a message to the jobs where they want to pay peanuts or they want to take advantage of people, because I think that that's really important. There's a lot of discussions and movement I know going on about unpaid internships and all those things. And I did unpaid internships, and it helped a lot, but I also know that it's the privilege of being able to do that and the struggles around that. So, I hope that this helps a little bit. I think at the end of the day, and I remember they said this is when I was back in journalism, because they say the same thing about that. If you want it, you will do it. If you want this and you are passionate about this, you will get there. And it just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of patience.
Awesome. Oh, Ryan, one last word. I was going to say that's some amazing
Jenny
round
did
of
fantastic.
advice.
Yeah.
Amazing round of advice, career talk from our panelists. And we're just coming up to around 8 o'clock almost. So I think that's a great place to end this panel. And I'm going to pass it off to Sam for some closing remarks before we head over to the expo floor.
Okay, thank you, Megan. I want to start by thanking everyone for coming, and that goes from the attendees who have come and they've listened and they've engaged in the chat, to our wonderful panelists for giving us such a in-depth and thoughtful discussion. I feel like I learned a lot as well. I also want to thank the mentors for their work throughout the whole of the program. As we saw in the presentations, the mentees really benefited from it and had a really very good, very positive experience. So thank you to all the mentors. Thank you to the Ottawa Community Foundation for funding this, for enabling us to do this. Thank you to the board members as well for Capital Heritage. And finally, a big thank you to all the mentees. I've been very lucky to get to know you all over the course of the program, whether that is in workshops or through reading your reflections or just meeting one-on-one. And a really great group of people, and the future of the sector is clearly in good hands. So with that being said, we're going to now be moving on to the networking part of the evening, and a new tool for us to use. So I'm very excited to reveal that. But actually, before I move on to kind of explaining that, on the theme of looking to the future, we're starting to think about next year's mentorship program. So if anyone knows of anyone who'd be interested in being either a mentor or a mentee, please do let them know that we are here, and also let me know. So I'll put my email in the chat. Yeah, if you know of anyone who might be interested, please be in touch. So that being said, just do a quick run through of how the expo floor is going to work. So Megan has disappeared off to open up the booths ready for our arrival. So once we leave this part of the meeting, it will take you back to the lobby screen, and on the kind of buttons along the left-hand side, you will see Expo as one of the options. Oh, sorry, Sean, you had a question.
That was an accident, sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so if you click Expo, it will take you there. You'll create your little avatar, fill in your details. That could be, your name, the pronouns you prefer, the organization that you work for. It's up to you what you put. And then it will give a brief tutorial, and you'll be able to move around the expo floor. And so the way it works is that we have 9 booths set up that act as meeting rooms. So, and you can move around the floor, you go in, find a booth that you want to enter, space with some people to chat to, and kind of move around, like moving around conversations if we were in person. So it's going to work like that. And I think any further details for how that works were in the program guide, but you can also ask any questions if you have them. And then towards the end of the session, I think 8:30 is around when it's going to finish, there will be a 5-minute warning flash up on the Zoom Expo screen, so you'll know that it's coming. And then once it ends, it'll say the Zoom Expo floor is now closed, and it'll be kind of up to you to leave the session. I think that is everything I had to say. So again, thank you everyone, and I will see you on the Expo floor.